This is Lynn Fraser with the Kilby Center, and I'm really happy to be here today with Annie Grace. She has a great energy and a lot of innovative programs. And Annie, maybe you could start just telling us a little bit about who you are and how you got onto this path and where you are now.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for having me, Lynn. So yeah, my name is Annie Grace, and really for me, it has been kind of a lot of, I guess, what I would say happy accidents now that didn't feel so happy sort of at the time or in the moment. I have what I know now is somewhat of a different story than a lot of people with alcohol, in that I didn't drink a lot until I was in my mid 20s. So alcohol was really a non issue, very take it or leave it. Don't even remember, probably could count on one or two hands how many times I drank in college. It just wasn't even a thing. And then when I was in my mid 20s, I moved to Manhattan with my husband, and I started working in various corporate marketing, the world there, and really was come to find out very quickly that the happy hour was as much a part of the work, culture as anything else, and not only as much of a part, but a really vital part. And so, when I wasn't showing up at happy hours, I actually had a boss take me aside and say, "Hey, Annie, like, where are you at happy hour? Why aren't you coming? What's going on?" And I was like, "Oh, well, I don't really drink." And he was like, "Well, it's not about that. It's really about the fact that, you know, our ideas get heard there. That's where you meet the higher up execs. Everybody's too busy with meetings during the day. Like, if you want to go somewhere in your career, you need to show up." And I didn't really have, my parents didn't really drink. I didn't have a huge cautionary story with alcohol. So I was like, all right, didn't even really, to be honest with you, realize that alcohol was addictive. And started drinking, had a method: glass of wine, glass of water. And to make a long story short, fast forward a decade, and I found myself drinking close to 2 bottles of wine every day, and really being frustrated if we had to have a day off for some reason, whether we were traveling or if I was sick or we were somewhere. My husband was like, "Oh, we should just take a break," or I was the designated driver, just feeling frustrated and wondering, like, why is this that this thing has such a hold on me when it didn't used to? Why is it taking up so much of my brain space? And I could stop drinking for periods of time, but I never felt emotionally okay about it. Like, I would be able to stop physically, but emotionally, I felt sorry for myself. I felt like I was missing out, or like things weren't just going to be as fun, or and so it took up a lot of my thinking. And so I started to, do what most people do: create some rules and limits around my drinking. Okay, I'm just gonna only drink on the weekends, and then I break that rule. Okay, I'm just going to drink, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, break that one. Drink only, only after Wednesday, or only 2 glasses of wine a night, or whatever the case is, and kept just not, finding whatever reason to break them. And I remember very vividly waking up many nights at 3 in the morning just feeling like, man, you know, what is wrong with me? Like, why is it that this has such a hold on me? What happened? Who am I even? This doesn't make any sense. I'm totally in control in every other area of my life. I'm seeming to do good. Nobody even knows this about me. But like, for me, it's tearing me up, and feeling a lot of emotional upset about that. And and one day I was coming home from London. I had been there for a work trip, and I had been drinking the entire time. I had gone into the hotel bar in the morning on my way to the airport and basically asked for some mimosas. And it was super early. And the waitress said, "Well, we haven't opened the champagne yet because it's too early. The bottle will just go flat, but I can make you a screwdriver." And that was one of those little lines that, like, hadn't really crossed, like hard alcohol first thing in the morning. But I was like, okay, I feel so bad. I just need to get through so I can fall asleep on the plane. Like, okay. And so I had a few screwdrivers. And I remember getting off the train in the airport and sitting there. And I actually, just started journaling at that point. And I remember very vividly, I have the journals, sitting there writing, like, really realizing that what I was trying wasn't working. Also, really feeling like, what anything that was out there wasn't for me. I didn't feel like I resonated with anything. I actually had a girl, a very close friend of mine, who got sober with AA, and when I asked her, like, "Oh my gosh, we drink as much as I drink as much as you. What do I need to go to AA?" And she's like, "Oh no, I learned that I'm an alcoholic. I was born this way. You're not." And that was 6 years before this epiphany. And so I was like, "Okay, well, obviously that's not for me. Where do I fit in this?" And not maybe asking that question consciously, but definitely feeling like, "All right, there's got to be an answer here that I'm not seeing." And I think it was in that moment that I really started to ask a different question, which, I stopped asking what was wrong with me and I started asking, okay, well, what's changed? Like, why is it different? And I started looking more at the substance of alcohol than at myself. And I actually did something really radical to your summit title is I stopped trying to stop drinking and I just made a commitment to myself. I knew that the hamster wheel I was on of making limits and breaking limits was just taking my self-worth into the toilet. I knew it wasn't working. And I said, you know what? I'm just going to take as long as it takes and I'm just going to find the answer to why is it different? What's changed? Why is it that this fermented liquid in a glass has such a hold on me? And I just committed that that was my promise to myself. And I really felt like that was one I could keep because I was like, I can do that. And so that really started very close to a year's worth of exploration. I made a list of all the reasons that I drank, and I asked a lot of my friends why they drank, and I had this huge long list, and I just started going through it methodically and saying, okay, relieve stress. What does the science say? Does it really relieve stress? And lo and behold, does the opposite. And there's all these neurochemical reactions as to why. Okay, enjoyment, having fun, pleasure. What does the science say? Again, alcohol, repeated drinking actually steals your brain's ability to process normal pleasures, right? Who knew? So, over and over, every single thing that I'd been told that alcohol does, it did pretty much the opposite. And I was left with this like, well, why then are we drinking this substance in like not only levels that are just crazy? I mean, I knew with my build and my height that like 2 bottles of wine was an insane amount of alcohol to be drinking. But like why is it that like when I talk to people about this at all, it's like, "Oh, you're not the one with the problem. I've never even seen you drunk." Like there's this threshold for being a problem and I got really curious about that and realized that alcohol is one of the only things that and I guess you could expand it to any substance addiction, but that 100% is success and 99.9% is failure. And then I looked into studies about that, and I realized that there's a lot of evidence and a lot of studies that say like actually a compassion-led approach, an approach that's full of grace. And the more somebody treats their mistakes, not as mistakes, but as part of the path, as learning, instead of abject failures that they should be punished and shamed for, um, the faster they do recover. And I at that moment also learned about something called spontaneous sobriety, which is basically people recovering without any formal treatment, so never walking into a meeting, never going into rehab, and learned that not only is it more effective percentage wise, but it lasts longer and has more longevity, according to the research that I read. And I was like, okay, what is this thing? And it was fascinating because my dad is someone who's spontaneously sober. He would call himself a very serious alcoholic in his early 20s. And I don't know if it was when I was starting to come along or what happened, but one day he just up and stopped. He just was done. He reached his threshold. He's done. It's been 40 some years. He's just done. And and he's not the type of person that if somebody's like saying, "Oh, I bought this $150 bottle of wine. You want to have a sip, Jordan?" He'd be like, "Sure, I'll have a sip," but he wouldn't have a glass. He doesn't want it, right? But like he's not. So some people would be like, "Well, he's not even sober." And he doesn't care if he's sober or not. It's totally irrelevant to him. Like it's not even a conversation in his life. And I was like, "Okay, that's so interesting. Like that's what I want my goal to be. I don't necessarily want my goal to be sobriety or long-term recovery. I want my goal to be that alcohol is small and irrelevant for me, that it doesn't take up my brain space, that I'm not defined by this." And the most amazing thing, Lynn, was that through that process of research and discovery and understanding why we found ourselves in the place we found ourselves and why specifically I found myself in the place I found myself, my desire to drink left. It was uncanny. And I remember walking out of my office and telling my husband, like, I think I'm done drinking. Like, if you want to split a bottle of wine, we can do it. But I think I'm not really going to drink after this. And that was almost 5 years ago. And yeah, it's like just gone. And it is amazing because people will say, well, are you sober? And I'm like, no, I drink as much as I want whenever I want. I just literally have not wanted to have a drink in 5 years now. And that for me is a place of really true freedom of making it really small and irrelevant. And so I had done all this research on the computer, and then I'd been writing my reactions to it. And so I had this really humongous document of all of this. And I was like, okay, people like might benefit from this. So I figured out how to post it on a web page. I didn't even get email addresses because I didn't know how to do that. That was too complicated for me, but I just posted it somewhere. And within the first 2 weeks of me posting it, 20,000 people downloaded it. And I started getting letters from all over the world and people saying, oh my gosh, this works for me too. This is incredible. I've been trying this for so long and it hasn't worked. And now this resonates and it's amazing. And I actually got a letter from someone because I had posted my email address and he said, you really should make this a book. And I was like, oh, I should do that. I want to figure out how to do that. So I figured out how to self publish on Amazon. And it was very word of mouth, kind of guerrilla organic marketing, and went crazy. And then last I'd say it was almost 2 years ago now, the book ended up getting the attention of publishers, and so it ended up going to auction among the top 5 publishers, and I ended up signing a 2-book deal with Penguin Random House and Traditionally Publishing last January, so it's been really cool, but
That's a really interesting road to get into the kind of the big time in terms of the big 5 publishers and getting your word out there, and yeah. Well, part of what you said right at the beginning when you were talking was how you didn't really have alcohol around in your home. My family was similar. My dad would have like a couple drinks of rum at Christmas and mom never drank, but we never talked about it either. Like it was never like, you should be careful about alcohol or there's, some people get addicted or and 3 out of the 4 of the siblings ended up partnering with people who had problems with alcohol. And I just thought, part of the reason for that is because there was just no discussion about it or anything, which, and then I drank pretty seriously too. And in my mid 20s, I stopped. I think for me, I was getting really sick from it. And I realized I just didn't want to vomit that much.
yeah.
So I stopped. But again, it just didn't have any draw particularly for me after that. And it wasn't hard to quit. So I didn't have that physical addiction, I think, that some people have. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I can really relate to that, and I think that it's,
Yeah.
you know, I have pretty big disclaimers on all of my books and my work. Is like it's really important to kind of gauge that for yourself because I think while my work can help with the mindset, really open your eyes to the realities of the science about alcohol and what it does in a way that's really relatable. It also is not going to help you detox, and that can be such a dangerous thing. And so I always do feel like I need to like be really careful with people because there are certainly instances where we need to have medical per-
Yeah.
intervention and just be careful with ourselves.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. So the people that you work with now, um, so you have the book and you have programs, and so I noticed there's this 30-day program that you have that starts in the new year, or you run those regularly through the year?
So yeah, so I always have a free 30-day challenge that it's called the alcohol experiment,
Mhm.
and anybody can just go and sign up anytime, and it's self-paced, so you go and choose your start date, and then a few times a year we run it live, so we get a whole big group of people all going through it together at the same time, and that's pretty fun. We've done 1,000 people, we've done 3,000 people, and just get like a big group and create a whole kind of culture and camaraderie, and it's a pretty exciting thing.
For the people that are doing that, what are some of the insights? Like, could you share a few stories about some of the people who've been through that?
Yeah, it's amazing. I think that there's all walks, right? So There's people who have really been trying lots of different things for a long time, and it just hasn't been working. And there's something that happens within our brains when we try something and it doesn't work, or we make a commitment and we break it to ourselves. We're much more likely to make and break that same commitment. And so it's kind of like this self-fulfilling thing. And it might not even be wrong, anything wrong with the thing they've been trying. It's just that because they've been trying it so much and it hasn't been working, they've built a belief that it isn't going to work. And so to have something very markedly different feels really new to them because there is a core desire to really stop. So I think there is certainly a good percentage of people that come into the alcohol experiment with the intention of stopping drinking. Like that's what they want to do. They want the 30 days to be a launch pad for the rest of their life. And that's what they want to do right from the beginning. And I think there's a lot of other people who come in and they truly are approaching it like an experiment. They're coming in to say, like, okay, I hear all this hype, especially in the media lately. Am I going to feel better? Is my skin going to look better? Am I going to lose weight? Am I going to sleep better? What's going to happen? And I always say, well, just try it and see. Like, take a little experiment, see what happens, see how it goes. And so there's certainly that a bunch of people who go through it very much for an experiment and do get a lot of mindset shifts and then go back into drinking, but with kind of a much more mindful approach. And I think that's really the goal of the alcohol experiment. It's not to, eradicate or demonize alcohol, although a lot of the science does just it's just you tell the truth, and it is pretty damning to the substance. But it's much more to say, okay, well, look, getting in your car is dangerous. Going skydiving is dangerous. People choose to do it anyway. So why don't you just very carefully, with all of your brain, know the facts and then make a decision so that your decision isn't being made for you based on societal programming, conditioning, prior experiences, your parents, and everything else. So it really is at the crux of it about taking a very mindful approach and saying, okay, let me know everything about this thing that I probably ingest more than anything else, and then let me decide with that knowledge. And the truth is, some people realize like, oh, geez, well, a 30-day break, it's not going to do it for me, right? And that's a huge win too. And I consider any outcome a win, really, because if you get one day in and you're day one, day one, day one, day one, by day 4 or 5, you're kind of like, oh crap, well, this is a problem, and you have this awareness now to where you didn't necessarily have it before. That because I know for me that was really true. I always thought, oh, it's no problem to just drink less or stop drinking until I tried to drink less or stop drinking. And I think that point for a lot of people is I always say, like, awareness can be so painful, but it should always be celebrated because you can't change what you're not aware of. And so there's absolutely a group of people who I'd say it's a minority because the marketing is really careful about, like, look, this is not recovery, it's not treatment, this is just a little challenge. But there is certainly a group of people that get into it and realize, okay, I need more than this, and then they take those next steps, whatever that might be.
So do you support people through those next steps as well?
So we have two more intensive programs. So we have a 3-month coaching program, which is it's a very deep dive, and it's a smaller group, and it's much more. It's actually Zoom calls like you and I would be talking to each other. So it's one-on-one, as opposed to the alcohol experiment is very much one-way communication. There's
Mhm.
communication in the chats and everything else. But the 3-month coaching program, it's called the intensive. And we actually have a few doctors right now who are working on efficacy studies for both the intensive and the alcohol experiment, because what I
Mhm.
can tell from just anecdotal evidence or just watching people go through it is it's incredibly effective.
Mhm.
Um, and the intensive is different because, again, it takes a completely different approach, whereas it's a 12-week program. But for the first 9 weeks, you do what I did in my journey, which is you take a pause and you stop trying to stop. And you just say, okay, I'm just committing to showing up, being on the calls, watching the educational videos, going through the journaling exercises, and I'm not going to muddy this experience with all the internal cognitive dissonance and drama and upset of this battle that I'm living in, because they're not stopping drinking with all this effort to stop, by the way. So it can sound so scary. Well, you're telling people to stop trying to stop, and I was like, just for a minute, just need to get their breath, just need to rebuild some success stories, just need to
Mhm.
kind of rebuild their confidence. And it can be especially hard for a partner. They're like, wow, we've just invested in this course and now you're not stopping until, like, what, week 9? Like, how I wanted you to stop tomorrow. And it is some interesting conversation. So we actually have some education for partners and spouses, just explaining the methodology and why it does work. And really the program, it's called the path, and it's a 4-step program. So it's P for pause, which is you pause and you put down the weapons of shame and guilt in a tiny, I'm going to paraphrase this, each section of this has a lot more layers. Pause, and then act. A is for act, and that's a technique I've developed. It's called awareness, clarity, and turnaround, and that's very much this. It's a I didn't realize it was really probably a CBT technique until um, after, and someone told me, "Oh, this is like CBT," and I was like, "Oh, I've never studied that." So it's interesting in that regard, but I think it probably for people to just get around it. But it's really becoming aware of the thoughts that are driving your behaviors, clarifying where they came from, are they true or not true, with research, and then turning them around. And so it's this process of just undoing your subconscious conditioning around alcohol is the A. And then the T is transform, and that's where we have very specific paths of how to make choices. So I have 2 exercises that I have everyone do, and one is non-negotiables. You really write a list of like everything that you've decided consciously is more important for you than alcohol. And then I have a technique called lengthening, which is you build on something you know you can win. So if what you know you can win is one single day, that's what you do. If what you know you can win is 30 days and you have the momentum and commitment, that's what you do. But you build on success, and you start to build on what you know you can win. And then the H is for hone, because it's not a straight line. It's an up and down. And that's really for just holding yourself and each other with a lot of grace and revisiting. Okay, I drank, what went wrong? What was happening right before it? What was happening during it? What was the underlying thing? During the hone phase, we discover all sorts of things. We discover that people have actually are really depressed but have been medicating it with alcohol to the extent that they didn't even know that they were depressed, right? Or we discovered that people are dealing with a lot of trauma perhaps, and then referring them to different, like I have kind of a bank of resources, but then also just really knowing where we can live and where we need to refer people on or outside to therapy. Will recommend therapy, different things. And that's just in the honing. It's like, okay, you made your plan, it's not working. Let's really get very aware of why not. And so it's taking people through that process. So we do it in a 3-month program, but then I also have, and we've only opened it up twice. I also have a year-long program, which is a one-on-one program where this is a bit crazy, but 24/7 you have walkie-talkie access to your coach, so you can for an entire year. And again, we did, because there's only the first year I did that program, we had only 42 people in it, and a year later, 76% of them were very solidly alcohol free. So they were
Oh,
really on
wow.
solid ground. And most of them had been alcohol free for the majority of the year and felt really, really solid. And then we're just a few months into our second year. So we have another group of about 40. And I mean, ultimately, it would be great to, since it is working, like scale it. But right now, I want to make sure it works, right? And so I'm keeping
Mhm.
things small. I don't advertise that on my site. It's something that only opens once a year because, again, I'd much rather do justice to a smaller number of people in the short term, and then when we know that the process
Right.
is working, open it up further.
Yeah. One thing I just talked to so many interesting people in the summit, and last year I was talking to Ken Seeley from Intervention 911,
Mm.
and he was talking about programs that are available for doctors and pilots and lawyers where they have 5 years of support.
Wow, that's amazing.
And it really works. And people need a lot more than 10 days of detox and 30 days in a rehab center,
Yeah.
because that's not enough time. And yet so many people can't even do that. To blow up your life and go someplace for a month or two is pretty difficult. And so I love the online capacity that opens up, because you can work with people quite intensely while they're still working, they're still at home, and you can do a lot of that really deep work that takes time.
And
Mhm.
it does show because we have lots of doctors and lawyers, and because you can also
Ah,
join it completely anonymously, right? So you don't have to sort of risk.
mhm.
And I've heard the stories about how if you even we have nurses, and if you even come out with this might be an issue, it could be a big problem for your career. Pilots, and it's just interesting. But yeah, because the requirements really are just an email address, um, that people can do it in a very private manner, which I think people really do appreciate.
Mhm. So let's talk a little bit about shame. You mentioned that as one of the foundational steps. What do you like? How do you see that, and how do you help people with that?
I really help people to when I talk about like really putting down the weapons of shame and blame. I think in our minds, when we start to realize we have a problem or an addiction, we look at it as a fight. And we think of it as a fight with ourselves, right? There's a part of me that's doing something that I hate doing. There's a part of me that loves to be doing that thing. And now these two parts of me are totally at war. And when we can't win the fight, we turn up the volume. At least that's what I did. And that's what a lot of people who have come through my programs report that they have done as well. And so you start to turn up the volume with things like, I can't believe you. How could you do this? Don't you care about anything? Don't you care about your family? Don't you care about yourself? Who are you? Is this really more important than your children? And, all of that stuff, if we think about conflict, just witnessing strangers fighting or it on a movie is intense as a human being. Witnessing conflict in the home is really intense. But what we don't really reflect on or talk about is the conflict and the trauma inflicted on ourselves through that process is one of the most painful and damaging types of conflict of all. And so, it is very eh, rare that somebody hates themselves into truly healing. You can hate yourself into changing for a period of time if the pain is bad enough. But even in that time, if the behavior has ceased, you still hate yourself and you're still quite miserable. And I had never even heard the term dry drunk until about a year ago. And I was like, what does that mean? And they're like, somebody who's absolutely miserable and dejected in their life, but at least they're sober. I was like, oh my gosh, that's so intense to think about, right? And so the foundation of the pause in my work is really to say, whoa, 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 whoa. Let's reframe this whole thing. Let's stop asking what's wrong with you and let's start asking what's wrong with that thing that has, that glass of liquid. And let's really realize and understand at a very deep level that you were using the tools that were given to you and you were doing the best you could with those tools. Now, the tools that society gave you, young mom, with the play date and the bottle of wine, were just not tools that anybody understood were going to take your life down and end up resulting in you losing your children, right? So it's not you. And so I share studies about mice who are force fed addictive substances and how 100% of them, when they're force fed it, become addicted. And by the way, they have to be force fed it because instinctively they won't drink it because it's poison, which is a whole other thing. But, and that's the thing. And I really tell people, I'm like, look, you were doing the best you could with the tools you have, especially if you're dealing with trauma. Your brain, when it becomes addicted to something, is working exactly how it was created to work. Because in your brain, it says, okay, what do I need for survival? The addictive substance overstimulates parts of your brain that say, okay, that's what I need. And then all of a sudden, your brain gets confused and puts that substance above your basic biological needs because it says, this thing is the most important thing I need to survive. So it's not that you as a human have somehow like lost your humanity and you're choosing the bottle over your child. It's that your brain literally believes at a neurochemical level that that substance is vital for survival and you will die without it. And so when you start to see this, and I'll show this in like, again, studies with mice, which have, are hugely applicable here. where mice will walk across an electric grate and get blisters on their feet, and they will forego food and forego water and neglect their young in order to get at the substance that they've been force fed that they're now addicted to. And then, as you know, the studies further confirm that if those mice were subject to that substance during a traumatic experience, or even when they were just left alone or without companionship, the level of addiction and how quickly it becomes something paramount for survival is very quick. So when a human being goes from drinking socially in college to drinking to survive motherhood, or drinking to survive a divorce, or drinking to survive an abusive spouse, or childhood trauma, oh my gosh, boom. But again, your brain is just doing the best it can with the tool you've given it, right? And so all of a sudden when you say, oh my gosh, it creates space for you realizing, wow, it wasn't my fault. I'm not a horrible human. I can put down all of these weapons that aren't working. And by the way, I can put down weapons full stop because they're not the answer. And through that, you allow the space to say, but it is my responsibility because I am the only person that can change it. And when that changes, when that shifts, oh man, everything changes. Like that's 99.9% of all the work right there is that shift from being at war with yourself to realizing that you've been doing the best you can, to realizing, but it's still my job to fix it.
Right, right. And then to use the neuroscience that we know now to support the change. And that's probably a lot of what it is that you're doing with people when you're giving them this one-to-one support and in the groups.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a process. It's called HRT, HART, and it stands for Hope, Relationship, and Tactic. And it's how every coach should approach every single interaction. And the hope
Mhm.
is simply really, really drilling in that, like, this is a hopeful thing. Human beings, again, the studies show that we won't try something we don't think we can succeed at. We
Mm,
won't do it. And
right,
we can't force ourselves to do it. So we need to believe that this is possible. And that happens in tons of ways. It happens by seeing your peers doing the same thing. It happens by actually being in the group dynamic, which even in the one-on-one coaching, we have weekly group calls with your whole tribe. So you have one-on-one access to your coach, but you're in a group that's supporting you, which is so key and so vital.
yeah,
And then we build the relationship of just really because nobody wants advice they don't ask for, and nobody's asking for advice from someone they haven't like really seen. Okay, you have what I want, so
mm,
now that's the advice I want. And then the third thing is a tactic, which is really whether it's a journaling exercise or whether it's really digging deep into a belief with some studies. um, if somebody's really stuck on the taste of drinking, like I just can't give it up because I really love the taste, like we'll have them read the study that says that humans cannot distinguish a good wine from a cheap wine, and they also can't distinguish dog food from pate. And we'll have them read the study that says actually alcohol numbs your taste buds, so it makes the rest of your food taste worse. And so
right,
we'll go through these things, and we'll have them do like something like if they're still drinking, you might even have them try like just pure alcohol and be like, does that really taste good, or is it all the mixers that taste good, right?
right,
And
right.
doing just these unconventional things to help them get it, because I think when people get it on a one of the truths that I know about humans is that we don't over the long term do the things we don't feel like doing. We do the things we feel like doing. And so what I want to do is help facilitate people feeling like drinking iced tea instead of a margarita,
Mm,
because that's where I found so much freedom. I feel like having a non alcoholic drink more than I feel like having an alcoholic drink. And was that
right,
a short process? No, it wasn't. It took a lot of very, very inquiry, like mindful, curious work, and really seeing where there's a snag. But I also believe that anywhere there's a snag, any really intense craving, any trigger, what we're taught to do is just like get through it or ignore it or get yourself out of the situation. And I think all those things are great if they keep you not drinking in that moment. But I also think then there's work to be done outside the moment, because triggers can be solved. Like we don't get that. We just think, oh, I'm just going to be triggered. Well, no,
right.
like they can actually be solved. I used to be triggered every time I go. I used to fly for my corporate work, first class. And every time I'd get into first class and it would be free alcohol, be totally triggered. And it was so weird because I would be fine any other time. But like in this situation, I was like really wanting a drink. And so outside of the moment, I really dug deep and I realized that there was a lot of scarcity in my childhood. And the idea of saying no to something free brought up a lot of intense emotions for me. And so I did an exercise with myself where I counted the cost of that drink. And all of a sudden I realized it wasn't free. And so then that trigger, like I don't have any anymore. It's not that I have to just resist it every time I would be offered free alcohol. It's that I literally don't have it. I'm like, oh, free? Uh-huh. I know. I know that's not free. And
Uh,
so we really, that's part of the hone process, the H in path, is we really like go deep into where's the trigger and let's solve it so it doesn't haunt you anymore, right? Instead of let's just resist it. Willpower is almost a bad word in my work. And I know that willpower has a place, but willpower by its nature indicates that you're in a fight because you have to use
right.
your will. You push, push, pull, pull. There's power, there's will. Like you are fighting against something. Whereas if you solve the trigger, there's no fight. And so that's, ultimately the goal.
So instead of having to say no to a free drink, you're saying no to a drink that you don't isn't free. So you've got that clarity that in fact it's not free.
Right. It's going to cost me my morning. It's going to cost me um, my self-esteem. It's going to cost me some brain cells. It's going to cost me use of my prefrontal cortex. It's going to cost me my husband being disappointed in me. It's going to cost me disappointment in myself. I mean, the list goes on and on. And I'm like, wow, that is a lot of cost. I would rather pay you not to have that drink at this point.
Right.
I'll give you $50 to not drink that, and
Not
then the whole conversation changes.
yeah, true. So were you still working in the corporate environment where the happy hours were so important when you stopped drinking?
Yes, I was. I continued to work there for it was years, maybe just over a year. I'm trying to remember the exact timeline, but yeah, I didn't stop. I stopped drinking, well before I published the book, and then I didn't stop working until after I published the book. I had this really actually incredible opportunity where my company, which was headquartered in London, and I'd spend months every year in London, living over there and just traveling. Had a visa and everything, and they said, "Okay, we need you to move." And I said, "Well, what if I don't move?" And they said, "Well, the other option is offering you a severance package." And I was like, "Oh my gosh, well, all right, I just have this book coming out. I know I don't want to go live in London. Why don't I just see if this will work?" Right. So that was really
Yeah,
how that
cool.
worked out. Yeah, it's very
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. So what was that like for you to be or did you continue to go to the happy hour and without drinking or what was
Yes,
that? Yeah.
I did. I was so gung ho that I was not gonna shift my outward life. Now it was really interesting because I think that I went too far. And I'll give you a very poignant story to explain exactly what I meant. So I'd show up at all the dinners, I'd show up at all the things, and I remember we left a late night dinner. So we left the restaurant. We were all having a great time. It was really fun. And it was funny too, because things shifted because I was the boss too. So like if I didn't order wine, nobody would order wine, but I knew they wanted it. And I didn't want to make things like, I was like, I don't want to impose my will on you. So then I'd go and I'd order wine for everybody and then just ask them to bring me something else after everybody had poured their wine, and then everybody was fine. But it was funny. I had to navigate some of those things to make sure that, like, because I always felt very strongly that this is a decision for me.
Mhm.
And amazingly, by making it 100% about me, there's been a massive ripple effect in the people that I know in my life. um, Not even any of the people that I've reached online, but like just in real life. But so this one night we left the restaurant about 10:30 at night, and everybody's like, "Okay, we're gonna go to this bar." And I was like, "Okay." And so we go and we're standing there, and its music is so loud and it was smoky, and I couldn't hear anything. And I'm just like sitting there, and like there was some office romance that was starting to happen right next to me, and other people were in conversations and like nothing. And I was just like sitting there like, and so I got back to my hotel room at like 1 in the morning, and I called my husband because it was earlier in the US. And I was like, man, I guess I'm wrong. I guess I can't have fun without alcohol. I was like, that sucked. And he's like, wait a second. He's like, did you have fun at dinner? And I was like, yes. He's like, "Okay, give me a break. That situation is not fun. That's why people have to drink alcohol." It's like, "Oh." And so just that clarity, because I did have this panic moment of like, "Oh, I guess I can't really have fun." It wasn't a I'm gonna drink, but it was a,
Right.
"Man, this kinda sucks." And then I realized, I was like, "Okay, there's a certain point where it's just not fun anymore." And by the way, like, when somebody's getting drunk and you're no longer getting drunk, wow, it is so much, it's like mind-bogglingly, eye-openingly, holy cow, because A, you remember that that used to be me, and B, you realize, like, after a few drinks, you're not sharing the same space as they're sharing. You're not sharing the same reality. The funniest, wittiest people would just become really dumb. And I was just like, "What?" And I'm always all for the social experimenting, like, looking at people, watching, seeing what's happening, observing, and it's mind-boggling. So, yes, I still do all the things, but I also now know that there is a point where it's not fun. And by the way, when it's not fun, nobody knows if you leave, 'cause you
That's
just
true.
ghost. I love ghosting. It's my favorite thing. Just don't even say goodbye. Just say, "Hey, how was the night?" "Oh, you were there too." Nobody even notices you're gone. It's fabulous.
When I quit drinking, I was still bartending. And I noticed that after a while, I just got really, really sick about being around people who are drunk because they're so boring.
Yeah,
And that was part of the reason why I quit bartending too. Yeah.
totally makes
It
sense.
changes everything, but it doesn't mean it's not fun. I think you get to a point where you're like, okay, the loud music, the smoke, it's not fun. So why would I stay here? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
So these cultures that, so much of our culture is built around the social lubrication of alcohol, and people can't kind of relax until they've had a drink or two. It's so built in. Do you, in your social circle now, do you hang out with people who drink as well as people who don't drink, or what's
Yes,
that?
I do, both all the time, and it's really interesting, and again, I get like my, "Huh," because now I'll show up somewhere and I'm like, "All right, I'm ready to hang out," and I do notice that the drinkers, which are most people, um, they need a few, like, even mentally, they need a few before they're ready to hang out. And I'm
Mhm.
like, "That's really interesting," because I do wonder, but the next morning at brunch, or if we're all camping, they don't need a few. So, like, there's something really interesting happening, and I had this major aha moment during my own personal journey, which was when I was becoming super mindful about exactly what I was doing, and you can't help it, by the way. If you're still drinking and at the same time you're going in the wee hours and learning exactly what alcohol does in your brain, you cannot help becoming like the most observant person of how it feels in your body and what's actually happening. And so I had this moment where I was like walking out of my office, and I'd always have this ritual walking out of my office, going to the cabinet. There's the box of wine because I was no longer drinking the bottles because I didn't want to know how many bottles, how
Oh,
much more than one bottle I drank. And
right.
I'd get my glass, which was right next to the box. I'd pour my wine, and I noticed I felt better then. I felt better pouring the wine before I ever took a sip. And I was like, "Oh my gosh." And I'm actually working with a research firm in Australia right now. We're just kicking off a project to see if this is true. It's going to start with a survey, and then if we have enough evidence, we're actually going to try and construct something where there's almost a placebo, and
Uh,
we're going to see where people start to loosen up, with and without, alcohol, but not knowing it's not alcohol. Hopefully, that's my
right.
dream. I don't know. He's like, the researcher's like, "That's going to be a tough thing to conduct," but I'm really certain, at least in my experience, that the relief was not in the actual drink. The relief
Mhm.
came in the knowing that I was switching from work to home, in the ritual, in the process of it. And I
Right.
really can observe that. I started observing it. So I'd go out, and I remember being in France, in Paris, and I was having dinner by myself, and this very like big group of and I didn't speak the language, so this was even better because it was like, so you can just so observe based on
Ah,
everything that's not, actual words. And so they walk in, and it's like 8 of them, I think, and you could tell they were just off work. They were all still dressed up. You could tell they were coworkers. They all sit down around this table, and everybody's kind of like humdy dum, and And then like they open the menu and they start like bantering about what they're going to order and like bantering about the wine, and like the waitress comes over and the whole mood changed, and like the wine hadn't even come, and all of a sudden they were like this. And then it took a long time that night to deliver the drinks, but they were like already going, but it was just like it was coming, right? It was happening. And so I think there's so much of it that is really mental for us, that we're almost as adults like, kids don't need permission, to, yeah, they might cling onto your leg for a few minutes and get the lay of the land, but then they're going. And so
Right.
we don't tolerate that little few moments in us where we're like, okay, is this group cool? Is this party cool? We think, oh, we got to just drink and then it's cool. But no, it's just let yourself have a few moments and then you relax anyway. It's really
Right.
interesting.
That's interesting. Yeah. They did a study several years ago now about diabetics and saw that when diabetics were starting to think about making a meal, that their insulin was being changed. So it
Wow.
wasn't actually the food that was changing it, it was the thinking about the food. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if there's so many associations around drinking and relaxation. And it wouldn't be surprising that it's the associations that let us relax, and we look forward to the drinking that's going to happen, and we look forward to feeling that way, and then we don't actually need the drinking in order to make that happen necessarily. Yeah. Hmm. Well, that's interesting. So when you're working with someone who's kind of on the fence, and there's some trauma that they're using alcohol to manage, um, and whatever it is that's happening, they know that drinking has become a problem. They know that they need to do something. What are a few kind of first steps that you might advise for people? And it could be some of your programs that you do too.
So I think I really we do not claim at all, and we don't really dig into past. We don't claim to be therapy. We're really coaching in the true sense of like coaching being a creating forward momentum and forward trajectory. So
Mhm,
I see like my job in that situation is to really help this person understand that the emotions, in order to process and handle and deal with the emotions that they're numbing, those emotions have to be allowed to be felt and surfaced. And
mhm,
I think that that's one of these things that we just, uh, yes, is it more intense to live like sober without drinking and without numbing yourself? Absolutely. Absolutely. Like, have I cried more tears? 100%. Have I laughed a lot more? Also true, 100%. But it is very much more open. But like what I've learned is that our emotions are truly our guide to when something really is wrong. And that might be something wrong, like some intense traumatic experience, but it might also be something wrong, like a thought error and just a story that we've created about someone or something in our immediate environment that might not actually be true. That, by the way, because it makes us uncomfortable, we've been numbing it and we haven't allowed ourselves to explore whether or not the story is true, or even allowed ourselves to question it. And so, what I really help people to understand is that healing is on the other side of feeling your emotions. It's
mhm,
not actually on the other side of medicating your emotions, and medicating, by the way, the symptoms, not doing it in any way that's a cure. I like to use the analogy of like, pretend you had a festering wound on your hand, and alcohol is like taking a Band-Aid and putting it over the wound and just letting it be dark and warm and fester. And is it going to be nasty when you pull off the Band-Aid? Yes, of course it is. But on in that nastiness, you can clean it and tend to it and heal it and expose it to the air and the light and allow it to heal itself. And so I think that's, yeah, we really see our job in just helping people understand that true healing is on the other side of feeling. And when you're numbing, it's very hard to heal something you're numbing, because you can't even understand the cost of staying stuck, right? Because you're just numbing the pain. So yeah.
mhm. So the people that go through your 30-day alcohol experiment, what kind of do you have kind of percentages of the people that actually just turn away from it completely, or do people just use it like as an annual reset, or what's people's experience with that?
So we are working on percentages, like we've just introduced. So I had a survey, but I didn't know anything about survey design. So from our survey, we were able to realize that, um, and this is a weird statistic because of how I designed the survey, but that the average person spent 77.8% of the 30 days alcohol free. So that's interesting, but it doesn't actually do anything for us because we don't know what percentage of people were 100% alcohol free and what percentage of
Oh, I see. Okay.
right? So, like, that statistic doesn't actually give me anything. So, I involved a few like experts in the field to, and we've just actually launched a new survey where we're going to be able to get that information on a much clearer level. Now, I will tell you that we do have a lot of people who come back, and people will come back in two forms. If you've done it once, you can come back and be a mentor, which is just like a volunteer thing. You write mentor in front of your post, you encourage others, you show up in the group, and you get to just do the whole thing like again as from a mentor perspective. And a lot of people will just come back and just do it again because the truth is that people will take a 30-day break, they'll feel great, it'll be amazing, they'll feel like superwoman, and then they'll go into their normal life and it's like, oh wow, that's a crash. And then they learn, okay, actually there's stuff that has been under here, because I think we can get a lot of momentum from a time period that's fixed,
Hmm.
but it doesn't actually necessarily address some of the underlying things. And so then you need to really do that. And so I offer, um, obviously, our own programs for people who want to go further into that, or depending what somebody's dealing with, if it feels like something that really they need to go back and deal with something in their past, we'll point people to therapy. But yeah, people do repeat it, and it's cool. And sometimes it's just like they just want to, they want the camaraderie. I was talking to a woman, I actually got interviewed by from a magazine earlier today, and she was an alumni, and she said she just did it again because she hadn't still drank in the 200 days or whatever, but
Oh,
she just wanted to do it again because she just liked the experience. So, but yes, I don't have statistics yet of where people go and how it
right,
works and stuff, but we're working on that. So I'm very excited about that.
right. It would be interesting to know as well, although this is harder to quantify too, is what's happening with people's shame. Are they feeling more comfortable with themselves now? Are they happier? All of that. Because it's not just like you say, it's not just whether or not you're drinking.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I mean, anecdotally, I could say yes, 100%. People really transform how they look at it, and they do move from that question of what's wrong with me to, wow,
Right.
what's wrong with this society, what's wrong with this drink, and while those maybe, maybe we want to even evolve past those questions, but for as a stepping stone, that's a really beautiful shift because it takes somebody out of that shame cycle.
Yeah. Well, there's obviously something not working well about our culture, that there's so much mental illness like anxiety and depression. There's so much addiction. It's the rare person who's not really suffering in some way with addiction to
Mhm.
something.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Mhm. Mm. Well, what a wonderful, so that's your new full-time job since
Yes,
your
yes.
programs and what you're doing. What a wonderful thing that is. Yeah.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's amazing.
Yeah. So let's just tell people how they can get a hold of you. What's their best way?
Awesome. Well, if they want to try the 30-day challenge, it's always free at alcoholexperiment.com. And if they're interested in anything else, my podcast is This Naked Mind. It's got like 3.2 million downloads. I think it's really popular, and it's just every week I have someone come on and tell their story, and then I also have another episode weekly where I answer just questions like any question you can imagine. I
Mhm.
answer. So, and then my website is thisnakedmind.com.
Okay. So people can reach you there.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for doing this. It's
Yeah, it's
been
been a
great.
pleasure. Thank you, Lynn, for having me.